All right, today we're going to look at the French and Indian War as well as colonial resistance, taking us up right to the American Revolution beginning. So we'll start with a slideshow. So if you want to look along with me, the first slide is that title slide. So we'll move on to the next one and get right into the French and Indian War. So up to this point, we've talked about settling and colonization in North America, and we've mostly talked about England and what they've been doing with the 13 colonies all along the Atlantic seaboard. Well, they're not the only ones there. As you may already be familiar, the Spanish are further south in places like Florida and the Caribbean and Central and South America. And the French are actually in the north and to the west a bit, down the Mississippi. Well, as the population is in British North America is increasing and moving further and further west, what's going to happen is it's going to collide with those French settlements that are a little further out there. Now, the French are going to have more sparsely populated settlements. It's mostly men who are coming to be involved in the fur trade, which was very profitable back in Europe. So they didn't have the large kind of complex colonies that the British did. So when by 1754, this collision is going to happen out in the Appalachian Mountains near what is close to present-day Pittsburgh. And that is where this collision will be met. And actually, some of the first shots are fired when a surveyor who is out there for the British by the name of George Washington is going to get fired upon by the French, which is going to set all of this into motion. So, as a result, a war is going to break out. France and Britain fought all the time, mostly in Europe. So, this is actually the first of their wars to be started in North America. It's also going to be fought in Europe as well. And while the French will be very successful early on, it will be the British that will end up prevailing. Now, the reason this is called the French and Indian War is because the French are going to be mostly teamed up with most of the Indian tribes in the area, with some notable exceptions. But by the French and Indian part, we're talking about really who the British are fighting against, both the French and the Indians, because they've teamed up together, in large part because the British have had bad experiences and relationships with the Indians. All right, as you've looked at before. All right. So what's going to end up happening is once the British win this war, the French are essentially going to be run out of North America. They're going to lose their holdings, which is going to mean the British are going to move to the west and control all the land up to the Mississippi River, which is significant, and all the area north in Canada will now go over to the British. So the French are basically expelled at this point. All right. Now, it's not going to come without a price because wars are expensive and the British are going to have to put a lot into this, so they're going to go into debt in a large way to fight this war, and they're going to need to find a way to pay it off, which is going to be the next challenge. So I'll move to the next slide, and the Proclamation of 1763. This is going to come out at the end of the French and Indian War. And essentially, what's going on there is the king is going to decide that he has got to protect the colonies. They're very profitable. Obviously, winning this very expensive war against France has just increased their value. And he doesn't want any more wars because they are expensive. So what he's going to do is he's going to issue this Proclamation of 1763, which is going to essentially tell the colonists, do not go west of the Appalachian Mountains. You need to stay east of them because we can protect you here. If you go west, you will probably pick fights and anger and start moving into the land of some American Indians with whom they've made some peace agreements and stuff like that. And so they don't make me get in a fight on your behalf. And so that's going to be that line. Well, this is going to draw some bad feelings because people don't like being told what to do in the first place, but especially after what's going on, and the king being so far away, the colonists are going to essentially say, like, where do you get off telling us what to do? And plenty of colonists are going to want some land and looking for land, and they can't get it east of the Appalachians. So they're basically saying, hey, king, you're causing me more problems. We don't want to do this. So a lot of people are going to be upset, and a lot of people are just going to say, yeah, I'm not following that. Tell me what to do, and I'm going to do something differently. All right, moving on to the next slide. Well, now we get into British changing policy in North America. We've talked about salutary neglect to this point, and how for the longest time the British were essentially letting the colonies run and do their thing, and that was that. And so they weren't sending over much help. They didn't need it. They were making money. They were happy. Leave them alone and let them make money for themselves and for you. Well, now that there's this large debt from the war, the British are going to want to get more involved. All right, and that's where the Stamp Act is going to come in. This is a revenue generating plan by Parliament, okay, to essentially put these taxes on certain items that people have to buy or want to buy, some of both, and that money is going to be raised to pay for the officials and the military that they're now sending in to North America to protect them. So essentially what Britain is saying is we want to raise the taxes so that we can pay for what you're getting, okay? And so this Stamp Act is going to be one of the first major pieces of legislation coming down to raise revenue in the colonies. And it's going to be passed in 1765. And so how it worked is there are these stamps that had to go on certain documents. Okay, so some of it like a birth certificate, a death certificate, a marriage license. Some things you don't really have a choice with are going to require this stamp, which is a small fee, but nonetheless it has to have it on there and you have to pay it. Okay, and so the colonists aren't going to really like this because they didn't get a choice in this, right? Nobody likes paying taxes, but you especially don't like them when you had absolutely no say in the matter. It's also going to include stamps that are going to go on newspapers, playing cards, things, hobbies that people had and things that people liked that they needed to buy. They're going to end up paying that tax because those were required. So this is going to outrage a lot of the colonists. They're not happy that this is going on. Remember, they're being taxed without having any say, and they never asked for this additional support, as we'll call it, or protection. They were basically like, "Hey, we're doing just fine ourselves right now." All right, so I'll go on to the next slide. All right, so the Stamp Act isn't going to go unnoticed, and in fact, colonists are going to organize against it, giving speeches, protests, writing petitions. Boycott, attacking stamp agents, all sorts of stuff. So it's not, don't get it twisted. It's not a peaceful protest. So there's going to be a lot of pushback to this happening. All right, and it's really actually going to be pretty successful. We'll go on to the next slide. And the reason it's successful is because it's organized and put together by colonists who have a plan and who are really smart. And that's where we get the start of the Sons of Liberty and the Daughters of Liberty. All right, groups that are organized to get the word out and to get these protests figured out. If you act as an individual, if a company makes you mad and you decide, okay, I'm not going to shop there anymore because they messed up my order or that they gave me a defective product. Okay, that's one thing, but you're one person. And big companies, they won't care, right? Because, you're one person. But when you organize and get a lot of people together and collectively do it, well, now it's a different story. And now there's a lot of money to be lost. So essentially what the Sons and Daughters of Liberty are going to do are they're going to organize these protests. They're going to figure out which products everybody needs to boycott. They're going to get the word out to that. And then, if they need to, they're going to attack stamp agents, throw bricks at their homes, and stuff like that. Again, this is not a peaceful movement. We're not talking about Gandhi or Martin Luther King here. These are there's plenty of violence. There's plenty of destruction going along with this. Okay, and one of the key figures starting this is going to be Samuel Adams, a lawyer in Boston, and he is going to be a very good organizer. All right, going on to the next slide. So what this is going to lead to as well with these protests is the committees of correspondence. Just ways for the colonists, who are going to call themselves the patriots, are going to spread the word about what's going on and what might happen next. It's essentially a big group chat that doesn't move as quickly. All right. And so what's going to happen is, if the British are going to take actions and put extra taxes or extra restriction on colonists in, say, Massachusetts, the committees of correspondence exist so that word can be spread to the other colonies, places like Pennsylvania, Virginia, Maryland, etc., so that so that they can be warned what's happening next. Okay? It's kind of the same for what you would be used to at school. If something's happening in one class and you want to warn somebody, hey, be careful about this quiz or this test, it's the same kind of idea. All right, but it was a way of creating a network of pushing back against the British, and it was a way of uniting these colonies who would otherwise just be kind of standing alone. All right, we'll go to the next slide. So, what happens with these protests? They're going to be successful. The Stamp Act is not going to be profitable because so much boycotting is going on, so much destruction is being made that the British are actually losing money. So they say, all right, pull that. Take away the Stamp Act. We got to do something else. All right? We're not going to let the colonists win, but we're not going to do this anymore because it's a loser. So what we're going to do is we're going to tax other items, things like paper, glass, other things that colonists buy, and it won't be a direct tax, so it won't have to have a stamp on it. But those extra taxes are going to be on the products, which just means when you go to the store to buy them, they're just going to cost a little more because the tax is kind of hidden in there. It's not too different from what you would see when you go to the gas station and fill up and get gas. You're paying tax, but it's already lumped into the pump. So when you're pumping the gas and you're seeing the meter run, it's already got the tax included in it. So it's a similar kind of concept and idea. But again, the colonists are aware of what's going on, and they're not going to just lay down and let it happen. So again, these taxes are going to be met by more protests, more boycotts, more challenges. Okay, until they get repealed and you go a different route. So that takes us to the next slide, and an important turning point in this. So it's kind of a cat and mouse game, a back and forth thing, but a new tax that's going to come along in December of 1773 is going to have it on tea. Now, tea was the most popular drink in the colonies, as it was popular back home in England. And the interesting thing about the tea tax that comes along here is that it's actually, with the tax, tea is going to be less expensive than it would be otherwise. And the reason is the British have got a special deal with the British East India Company, who was on the verge of going out of business. So what they decided to do was give them a hookup and give them a monopoly on colonial tea. Basically, we'll let you sell it there, we'll underprice it, and collect the tax. You'll win, you'll stay in business, we'll collect the tax, we'll be successful, and the colonists will pay less for their tea, so everybody will win. Well, the colonists are not going to go along with this. Yeah. You like low prices, but sometimes, for how they're doing it and what they're trying to pull off in terms of making it okay to tax them, isn't going to go over well. So essentially what happens is this big shipment of tea is going to show up in the Boston Harbor, and sit on this ship and be prepared to basically take it and distribute it to the sellers. Well, while it's sitting on the ship, the colonists don't want this ever coming off the ship. So instead of just keeping it off the ship or from leaving the ship, what they're going to do is they're going to hold the Boston Tea Party, which is a big event. It's going to happen in the middle of the night. People are going to dress up in costumes so that they're not recognized, and they board the ship and they dump the tea in the harbor. All right. Well, this is going a step beyond just protests and boycotts, because now they're damaging and ruining property that is not theirs. So in many ways, this is going to take it to another level and overstep the bounds in some people's view. In others, they're saying, hey, they were asking for it the whole time. Well, the governor of Massachusetts, who is a royal appointee, is not going to be happy. Obviously, Parliament, who has put out this tax, is not going to be happy. The king is not going to be happy. And so an extra punishment is coming along for New England and Boston specifically. And the colonists are going to call these the Intolerable Acts. It's essentially going to shut down the port until they pay for the tea. And they're going to put Boston under martial law, meaning you don't have any rights anymore. The military is running the show. Okay, and so it is going to be a tough scene, and everybody is going to be really mad. All right, and so mad that it's about to start the revolution. But we'll get to that next time. All right, thanks for watching.